Ooh, that looks tasty. Welcome folks, The Hungry Gamer is back with another mini review, and today we are talking about the Stars of Akarios. Now this is a mini review because I did a full-on preview and several playthroughs of the game back when it was on Kickstarter, so many moons ago. And actually I believe that's one of the videos where I actually had to record on my floor because I was in the process of moving into my lovely home here where, well, I didn't have any tables at the time. So I've received my copy of Stars of Akarios, and I got the core box and the minis upgrade. Didn't get the play mat or anything like that. And I've gotten to play through the entire prologue plus a decent chunk of the first act. So I do understand that there is lots that could change as I continue to play through this game. However, I have also had several people reach out to me on Messenger and say, should I be getting this game? What do you think? And I've specifically been asking for my opinion on it. So now that I have gone through several hours of gameplay, and that includes 2 world explorations, some space exploration, and 6 or 7 different space battles, maybe 8 space battles, I feel like I can give a decent idea about this game, and I feel comfortable with that. So with that said, what's going to be happening in Stars of Akarios, as I just referenced, is you're going to be playing the game in 3 different phases. You're going to have the space exploration phase, in which you're just moving the Sparrow, that's your ship, kind of around space, and you get to stop and explore different things as you go. And sometimes you have to stop and explore, sometimes it's kind of a choice that you get to make. Then, in addition to that, the bulk of the game, at least the bulk of the game so far, is going to be spent doing space combats, kind of dogfights. And these are going to be tactical skirmishes that you have as you're moving your ships around a hex grid, and then you have a pretty in-depth, or I shouldn't say in-depth, but pretty varied AI that's going to activate each of the enemy ships after you act every single turn. They'll be moving around, they'll be attacking, and they'll be putting different conditions on you, so on and so on. And it'll be using a method that's very similar to Gloomhaven, in that every time you do an attack, it has a set number of damage it's going to do, and you'll flip over a card and it will tell you, add 2 to that, double it by 2, you have missed, subtract 1, or whatever it may be. And you'll be moving through and fighting using your special abilities that you have, which are set on your ships, and you'll be doing that by rolling 4 dice, or 5 if you're playing solo, and you're going to use those dice to assign them to different things. So you may have a bunch of move on your dice, and so you're going to use those to simply move your ship. You might go a little bit forward, you might just rotate yourself, you might use your special engine ability, which can do all kinds of different things. Or maybe you're going to just use a bunch of them to kind of repair your ship and resupply your special abilities a little bit. Or you're going to be using your attacks and using those to activate these little templates that are kind of shooting out in front of you. And these templates aren't area effect necessarily, but they'll hit between 1 and 3 things in that area. And again, as I mentioned, you'll be using the cards to flip over and see just how well you've actually done. And as you're playing through, you have 3 different stats that you are kind of tracking. You'll be tracking your stress. As your stress goes up, you have the potential to add these miss cards into your deck because you're too stressed out, and then if you get really high, you start adding traumas to your deck, which do really bad things. However, you're also tracking your shields, which will regenerate a little bit each turn, and your hull. And so you're kind of balancing all that as you're going through, and I do want to point out very particularly that this is a little bit of a positional combat game, and the more so than just having your templates line up, it is positional combat because if you can get behind another ship, you're actually going to get advantage, which means you're going to be able to flip over 2 different cards to take the best benefit as you're doing your attack roll. And along with that, the last thing I'll say is, even your movement has different templates. You actually have to follow that entire movement. You can't be like, okay, this lets me move 5 hexes, I'm only going to move 3. Now you can do that, but you have to take stress to do it. So it's a lot about positioning, and there's a lot of tactics going on about where you are and how you're going to get where it is that you want to go. And then the last phase is the world exploration. And anybody who's familiar with 7th Continent is going to get a little bit of a 7th Continent vibe from this. It simply starts out, you have a single card that you're going to be on, you can put your minis on there, and you're going to spend your dice, you have the same dice, to move around and explore new locations. As you get to each location, there are different tests that you can take, or different things that you can explore, or you can investigate, or maybe just going to move on. But all of it's going to be based off of the scenario book, and it'll tell you right on the card what entry you need to go to. You'll go to that entry, and you'll read what it is. It might be a test, you might take damage, you might have to do something new, you might move somewhere else, you might find something. whatever it may be. All of this is wrapped around this one large narrative story that you're playing through. And as you go through, there's very clearly different paths that you can take, different people that you can support, different factions you can back, and of course, by backing one faction, make an enemy of the other. So you could go back and play the game again and make different choices and kind of follow a different storyline. So what do I like about this game? The first thing I'll say is I really do like the production on this game. It really is well contained. This is a game that feels like it has close to the amount of gameplay as Gloomhaven, probably not quite so much, and I don't know if there's going to be any kind of random scenarios you can do like you can do in Gloomhaven, but it's a smaller box. Even with the minis, it's still a smaller footprint. And so I do really appreciate that everything has its own spot, everything has a place where it should be, and that's accomplished because the combat board is always the same board, though there are two sides to it, and you're just putting different things out onto the board. It just works really, really well. Along with that, I really, really like the space dogfighting. It is just fantastic. The trying to manage your templates and trying to decide as you're upgrading your ship, because of course you get to upgrade your ship, what type of engines you're going to do, how are you going to position those maybe big bursts of movement with the types of attacks you have, or maybe you don't have, and the kind of text that you have, the kind of co-pilot you're going to get. You're just really going through and really making your ship your own pretty darn quickly as you move through the game. Along with that, each of the different ships starts out significantly differently because it's going to allow you to install different upgrades to it, and of course that's different, hull and shield. And all of that I do think works really, really well. I do really like the space combat. I think it's just fantastic. Along with that, with the caveat that it is early in the game, one of the things that I don't like about Gloomhaven is that flipping of the cards for your effect, because one of the things that you do in Gloomhaven is you start to cull that deck and you start to get rid of the bad things, but by getting rid of all the bad things, have a really, really powerful deck, you are increasing the odds that you're going to get that miss card, and the miss card in Gloomhaven is just so frustrating because you're on such a tight time constraint. Well, so far, while I still don't like the miss card, it feels less punishing in Stars of Akarios because rarely are you on a tight time frame. You can kind of move yourself out of combat and buy yourself around and just heal up your ship. And you have that ability, so it's not as punishing. And at least so far, I found I'm not culling my deck as often as I was in Gloomhaven, so perhaps it doesn't make it as likely to come up, though still don't like that miss card. I also enjoy the world exploration. And the reason for that is it's a breather in between the kind of intense combat that you're doing, where you're rolling your dice and you're assigning them. You're still going to roll the dice in the world exploration. You're still doing that, but the choices you're making are often story-based choices, which I think are fun. Who do you want to back? Do you want to be altruistic? Do you want to be a jerk? What do you want to do? And yet there's still some choices you have to make because you're spending your dice to move around and explore. And when you do these checks, you're going to have to choose, how many dice am I going to spend? How's that going to support the abilities that I already have inherent to my pilot? And it's a very, very clever mechanic. And it's, like I said, it's a breather in between. It's a way where you're going to really be able to advance the story and you feel like you have a little more control of the story. And there is that exploration vibe in there because you really are discovering things. As you go through, you're going to be like, oh, here's a thing. Here's a pile of rocks. I'm going to go check it out. Maybe that's going to blow up on you, or maybe it's going to be some kind of shrine that's going to give you more energy back. It just works really, really well, being not the focus of the game. It's a nice breather and change of pace, and by the time you finish the world exploration, you want to get back into the combat. And then so far, and again, it's still early in Act 1 for me, the space exploration is interesting, but it's almost a non-entity so far, and I'm okay with that. You have your map you build out and you can move around, though I will say I'm already starting to see in Act 1 where it's going to become more important. I'm going to have to start deciding, do I want to go this way or this way? Am I going to want to lose those supplies I have to move my ship around so I can go do something, then come back? So I think it will be more important the further and further I go in the game, but I'm not quite there yet. But I do like, again, the breather that it offers from the more in-depth other modes of the game. And then finally I'll say I'm enjoying the story so far. It's a story that is somewhat familiar. Feels like it's based on some sci-fi tropes that you may be familiar with already, but it's not a knockoff, and it is something that, like I said, I've I'm enjoying. I'm curious what's going to happen next. I'm at a point where I'm deciding which of these factions I really want to back, and I'm really worried that I've made the wrong choice for me as a human, but I'm not going to know until I get a little further in. So the story does have me crabbed. So what are my quibbles with the game? Well, I've alluded to some of these things already. The first thing is this game very much has its DNA based in Gloomhaven and Seventh Continent. Now, I don't know that for a fact. However, I've played Seventh Citadel, and I know how Seventh Continent works. I've watched a lot of it, and I've played a lot of Gloomhaven. It feels like an evolution of both of those things, and I think it's an evolution in a good way. But just something to understand. If you absolutely despise the combat system in Gloomhaven and the upgrade system in Gloomhaven, then you might not like this as much as I do. I've always enjoyed the combat system of Gloomhaven, and I think this one actually is a positive evolution to that, but it is an evolution of that. The same thing with Seventh Continent. Even though, as I said, you do less time in the world exploration, if you hate Seventh Continent exploration style and you hate the way that's done, then you probably aren't going to enjoy this, even though, as I said, I think this is a positive evolution from that, and certainly the combination of the two is unique. Then the next thing that I'll say is, it does feel like you're playing two different games, and you are playing two different games. You have your combat, your space combat, which feels very intense, and then you have your world exploration, which is tense, but there's more air in there. And while I do think those games go together, and it does make a delectable little sandwich, you do have to be interested in both of them, and you have to make sure you're there. And then my only other quibble is, I think the rules would benefit from a second version, and they do have an FAQ that was out almost immediately, and it's pretty easy to get answers to questions, but there are definitely some things in the rules that, and I did a preview and a playthrough, of course it was a couple years ago. There are some things that I've read the rules over and over again, and I just wasn't grokking. And I played it through a few times, or played through a few different explorations. I'm like, oh, I get it now. But they're just not quite as tight as perhaps they could be. In some places need a little more explanation, perhaps a little more clarity here and there. And I think it will get there. But again, that is truly a quibble, because I do think with the videos that they have and the Stars of Akarios community on Facebook, you can get the answers that you want pretty darn quick. But there you have it, folks. That is Stars of Akarios. Again, it's kind of my not quite initial impressions, my maybe quarter of the way through, a fifth of the way through the game impressions of the final product, Stars of Akarios. I'm really, really pleased with this. I'm really enjoying it. I was thinking I'm going to get to this point, film this, and then put it all away, but no, I'm going to leave it right there. It's actually right there behind me, and I just did this long world exploration, and I got a thing I get to go do, and so I think I'm going to go do that and play a little bit more and see how long I can keep that on my table. I really do think it's lived up to the promise of the prototype. I think it has, like I said, that DNA of Seventh Continent and that DNA of Gloomhaven, but you're not playing Seventh Continent. You're not playing Gloomhaven, but it really does feel like an evolution from both of those and then brought together, and it turns it into something that I think feels very fresh. It is fun. It's exciting. I really like it. I've had a blast painting the miniatures, and I'm really, really pleased with this. I think there's a very strong chance. Now, we are halfway through the year, but there's a strong chance that this winds up in my Games of the Year nominees. We'll, just have to see how it goes as I get through another, half of the game. Hopefully, maybe even finish it by the end of the summer. We'll see if that actually happens. So there you have it, folks. That is Stars of Akarios. As always, if you found this video useful, please like, subscribe, and share. Thank you so much for watching. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.